architecture and their talents in teaching architecture, but also because they are really a caring group. They work really well together. This is not one of those academic departments where people are like at each other's throats and don't like to be in the same room with each other, which is true at some universities. So that's one thing to be really clear about. Another is that we've got fabulous relationships with our alumni. So many of our alumni work in the Milwaukee area, so we have that as a resource in all sorts of ways, and are in contact with them a lot. In addition to our alumni, we've got tremendous relationships with other professionals here in the Milwaukee area, throughout the state, and obviously around the country and internationally as well. We bring people internationally to campus, well-known people. Every year there's something exciting like that going on. And then finally, the Milwaukee community is a tremendous asset. It's an asset that faculty use in their teaching. It is a great place to live. If you've not been to Milwaukee, I don't know how many of you are actually already located here in Milwaukee, but I'm going to pretend that none of you live here, even though I know some of you already do. It is a really great place to live, and when we're not all socially distancing, a great place to be out and about and meeting new people and making new friends. So I really hope that you have a wonderful conversation here. I'm going to stay mainly because I want to be part of the bike tour later. And welcome.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nancy. I'm also excited to welcome you to this event, and we're excited to have you in the fall. I'm actually going to share my screen here. We have a great lineup of faculty to talk to you today. We're going to do the first hour is going to be with our faculty, and then the last 30 minutes we're going to meet with our current graduate students. And my role today is to get you to think about 3 important actions that you have as a graduate student: control, opportunity, and choice. But before we jump into that, I wanted to share with you our new virtual environment. And we've moved online this semester, as most schools have across the world, but we're hoping to be back on campus in the fall. And if you've been following the news, you might have seen that universities are trying very hard to make sure that that happens this fall, to be back on campus. But while we are off campus, we have found our kind of virtual environment, and here's one of our events that we hosted, our virtual tea and binkies, to stay connected socially in these virtual spaces. So we're excited to do that. You'll hear more from our faculty today, and that includes Jim Shields, Nicole Bouchard, Arijit Sen, Chris Cornelius, Jose Ibarra, and Mark Keene. But now I want to introduce you to our whole faculty. And as a graduate student, you have control over your education. I always think about undergraduate as being a place where the program determines and dictates what you take, when you take it, and how you take it. And in graduate school, that you're really responsible about what you want to take and when you want to take it. This is an opportunity for you to find your passion and connect with faculty and take a deep dive into certain topic areas. This is about curating your experience. So we have faculty that are engaged in lots of different areas, and we certainly have 3 concentrations that are supported at the school. They include preservation studies, ecological design, and real estate development. But we also have lots of faculty engaged in different areas, and that includes different ways of practice. This is our historic preservation adaptive reuse kind of cluster of faculty. Ecological designs and systems thinking, emerging technologies faculty, community engagement faculty, fabrication installation, and even visual literacy. And what I think is important about our faculty is we're a pluralistic faculty with lots of crossover. And so it's not often a discussion about fabrication or representation or public health. It's about fabrication and representation and public health. So you'll see in our faculty lots of crossover about certain topics with multiplicity of interests. So here's our whole faculty, and we welcome you to the school in the fall. The second thing to think about is opportunity. And UWM, Sarup, and Milwaukee, as Nancy had mentioned, are really places of opportunity. There's a lot of great things going on already in Milwaukee, but one of the wonderful things about this city is that there's capacity for more. There's support in the community for new creative ventures, and this is a place of opportunity where you can find the things that you're passionate about and expand on those. Some of the things that we have going on at the school related to opportunities are things like our externship program, where these are short-term opportunities to work in firms, spending 1 to 2 weeks in a firm and connecting with professionals and alums. Over the last time I checked in on the externship program, we had about 89 students participate and extern at about 60 firms. And as graduate students, you really have an opportunity to tap into this program. It happens over winter break and spring break. And you can do that multiple times. So you can participate in as many as you can. And that's a great way to kind of feel out the profession and see where you align with certain professions, certain sizes of firms, and different kinds of work. We also have, as Nancy mentioned, a great alumni network. We've had alums working across the state, the country, and the world. And just to kind of list off a few of those firms, we've got a ton of alums in Chicago working at firms like SOM, Perkins & Will, Smith Gill. We also have alums who have worked in countries abroad, like in Germany. We had alums working for Francis Carey and Barkow Leiberger in Germany. And we have people working across the states, LA. We have alums working in Frank Gehry's office, Vincent James's office, Studio Gang, Kieran Timberlake, again, to name a few. So it's your opportunity to build on that network and connect, and we're here to help you connect with alums. Another opportunity is our mobile design box. This is our off-campus gallery, which is moving, actually. It's mobile's in the name, and we'll be moving to a new space on Mitchell Street in the fall. But this is an opportunity for students and faculty to showcase their research and design at the school. So here are a few images of activities that have gone on in this space. The third action to think about as a graduate student is choice. And we have a number of those to think about. We have Marcus Prize, Urban Edge, MasterCrit. When choosing studios at the school, each year you have about 14 studios to choose from. And this allows you to really curate and control your experience. What is it that you're interested and passionate about, and who can you connect with? The topics for studios often range from fabrication, detailing, big box retail, community engagement, performance spaces, historic preservation, rural community development, hip hop culture, and curation, just to name a few. And we also have our fabulous external critics coming in. So we have our Marcus Prize, and you can see some of our past winners. And we're excited that this year we're going to have Tatiana Bilbao joining us in the fall to run an elective studio with Alex Timmer. And then our Urban Edge winner, Herbert Dreisidel, will be working with Jim Wassley running a studio. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to hand over, if Jim might not be on the call. So I'm going to hand this over to Nicole Bouchard.
Hi. I will try sharing my screen here. Good?
Yes.
Okay. You see full screen now?
It's black. Yep, now we're on.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Bouchard. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Architecture and Urban Planning. just wanted to share a little bit about my research interests and how that folds into some of the design studios that I teach at SAREP. So in general, my interest in architecture and design is about the kind of birth, life, and afterlife of buildings. I don't know if you recognize this. It's the Bradley Center downtown that was blown up to make way for the new arena downtown. And so part of me wonders what happens to buildings when they are demolished before maybe their life should come to an end. And so thinking about the reuse of these materials is something that's very important to my own personal practice, but also the work that I do with students. So I wanted to share a little bit of the student work from the design studios and elective seminars that I've taught at SAREP. But before I get into that, just to kind of share a little bit more about my research, I'm currently working on this book project, Waste Matters, which emerged from the 2017 Urban Edge Award that I taught at SAREP, where Walter Hood was the keynote speaker. I brought in 6 other design professionals and practitioners to work with students throughout the course of the spring semester. That led to this book, which is a collection of different design projects and essays by a range of creative practices and practitioners from around the world, thinking about the afterlives of materials and architectures and infrastructures and how we might use adaptive reuse and spoliated materials to create new architectures and give new birth to old materials and places and things. And so those are some slides, some spreads from the book project. It also collects a series of terms related to the idea of waste or afterlives of materials and architectures. And that's really this kind of springboard that's propelling me into the next kind of round of the design studios that I'll be doing with students at SAREP. But a little bit about the past studios that I've done. Mo mentioned the Urban Edge Award that we have every other year or so. In 2017, as I mentioned, I ran it as an elective seminar where students worked with a series of designers across the disciplines of architecture, landscape architecture, and art. Over the course of the semester, we had 3 very kind of typical post-industrial sites throughout the city of Milwaukee. Over the course of a 3-day long intensive design charrette, the students worked with these people who were coming in from places all over the country to work on a specific site. They developed design projects that were for these 3 specific sites in Milwaukee, thinking about the reuse of materials, architectures, and infrastructures. I've also taught on elective seminars related to this idea of afterlives or material kind of waste. So here you can see some student work examples by an undergraduate student of ours. And in this course, we looked at waste through the lens of a more kind of historical and theoretical point of view, finding a variety of precedents in architecture, landscape, and art. And students developed design projects and also developed some written components to the work. But again, these were sites, specific sites in Milwaukee dealing with the kind of post-industrial detritus that the city has an abundance of. So that also led into or is related to other elective design studios like the From Waste to Wonder studio, where students started by thinking about the kind of life cycle of the various objects and artifacts in our daily life. Then they looked at, again, post-industrial sites in Milwaukee, like the Inner Harbor you see here, just south of the university on Lake Michigan. We also looked at the Artery, which was the former rail line just north of River West in Milwaukee, to develop a variety of design ideas at scales ranging from full-scale material mock-ups to master plan design proposals. The Wet Dreams elective studio similarly looked at a variety of sites throughout the city of Milwaukee, but this time at the confluence of the Milwaukee and Menominee River down in downtown Milwaukee. Students did a variety of research looking at the kind of abandoned landscapes and wasted infrastructures downtown. They thought about design at the scale of a kind of water filtration system, but then also thought about larger scale kind of landscape urbanism design interventions. The Tabula Scripta studio was less landscape-based, more building-based, where each student picked a specific building that was abandoned in Milwaukee and developed an adaptive reuse design proposal for it. So here you can see Amanda Galumba, who is a 3-year graduate student of ours, and she's doing thesis right now. The design proposal for the building that she selected to create it into to turn it into a creative practice kind of shared makerspace. And at the end of that semester, she drove by her site, which unfortunately was in the middle of being demolished. And Jordan Felber also worked to think about the adaptive reuse of this building along the Milwaukee River downtown, and what that may be as opposed to being demolished and made way for kind of tabula rasa development. So I know I'm running over time, just wanted to share a few other quick kind of thesis design projects by our 3-year Master of Architecture students. This is Patrick Wazowski, Amanda, sorry, I'm blanking on names. Come back to me. Zach Wozvik thinking about rising water levels in Miami. Rachel Momini thinking about abandoned frac sand mines in western Wisconsin. Leanne Wacker thinking about how to build architecture in places that aren't so kind of receptive of architecture or in habitation. And I should mention many of these projects that I just showed, the thesis projects, are award-winning projects, whether it's for our thesis prize award at SARUP or other kind of design conference awards, as Leanne won here in the Design Communication Award for Best Student Project Drawing. And just to kind of wrap up, I am proud of the teaching I've done with students at SARUP. I last year was awarded a new faculty teaching award, recognized for my work that I've done with students there. And in the future, I continue to kind of work on developing courses and elective studios and seminars that tap into this kind of waste-related design ideas, but also folding in ideas of representation and design communication, thinking about the way creative practices operate across the disciplines of art, architecture, and landscape from a diverse set of perspectives, thinking about this historically and theoretically, as well as in terms of contemporary design, working with students like Bob Alsop here, going out into the city, working with local organizations like Waste Cap Resource Solutions and the 16th Street Community Health Center on projects that are actually in Milwaukee and in the process of being implemented. So I look forward to working with all of you if you do decide to join us at SARUP in the fall or in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nicole. So we're going to shift over to Arijit Sen, an associate professor. Arijit, do you have slides or? Oh, wait.
Okay, let me get my sound done first. I do have something, I will share screen in a minute, but I'm not going to say much about myself. You can just, I'll tell you a little bit. I'm a vernacular architecture historian. I look at cultural landscapes of immigrants and marginalized groups in cities. I also do community engaged practice and design, teach the architecture and human behavior class, kind of what I do. If you want to know more about me, you need to do your own research, find out what I do. But I just want to share a couple of things that I learned, which I can share with you. The first thing that we learned by work, I work with a lot of communities in Milwaukee, and the first thing I learned is humility, humility of knowledge. So I go in there and it's not just 20, 25 years of knowledge that I collected, which matters. I gain a lot of knowledge from grassroots people in neighborhoods and so on. The second thing that we do in our classes, various classes, is designing through action, so praxis in many ways, and that is very interesting. It goes from all the way from building things and seeing how people use it and then learning from it, but also it goes with being on the ground, talking to people, actually constructing stuff and so on. So it's really sometimes known as project-based design. And the third thing is of research, that everything that we try to do is evidence-based. So, you know, evidence can be a variety of types, but to be a professional, it's very important for us to be research-oriented, oriented towards knowing certain tacit understanding of architecture and making it explicit. So I'm just going to show you a movie and then probably spend more time talking to you guys. Okay, how do I do that? Share screen. Okay.
I would like to thank for bringing light to our community, because our community has been pretty much ignored. the right thing. And that's what we all have to do as people. We're looking forward to working with you for a little while longer. And we're going to be so hurt when you leave.
Okay, and we're not leaving soon. We are here to stay. So that's what I do. There are a couple of websites, which I think many of you actually have. You connected with me. But there is something called the Field School that I work on. So I'll try and share. If not, then I'll just give up on that because I'm kind of not sure where it is. Hold on. Just share desktop. Okay, that's pretty simple. So there is this website, which just basically you'll know more about myself if you want to know more about me. But this is the website which I'm really kind of proud of. It's the Field School website. It's something that started as a summer 5-week project, 5 weeks project, but then it kind of exploded into summer, fall, and spring. And this is an interesting website too. It's called Milwaukee Environmental Justice Lab, which we've been working with a bunch of people in Newark, New Jersey, and across the country, 20 other cities. Take a look at it. But other than that, I'm open to questions. I don't know what else to say.
No, that's great. I think we're going to do questions at the end and as part of the summary. I wanted to move on to Associate Professor Chris Cornelius. And Chris, I don't know if you have slides to share.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. So I'll just talk about a couple of threads, I guess, that are in my work, and then how I kind of weave that into teaching. So through my research and practice, I have a practice called Studio Indigenous, and I primarily serve Indigenous clients in the US and Canada. And so one of the themes that comes up in both my work and teaching is the idea of design as ceremony. Thinking about the actual act of design and everything that goes along with it. When I'm placing things into the world, I'm trying to think about how that affects the world that it gets placed in all living things that get affected by that particular thing. So I was a collaborating designer with Antoine Predock on the Indian Community School of Milwaukee, which is in Franklin, Wisconsin. It's a K-4 through 8 school for Indigenous students in the Milwaukee community. And that project won a national AIA award for educational facilities. And that's the project that I started my practice with in 2003. And they're still a client of mine today. So I'm still active with the school and connected to that particular community in the city. So I've done a number of projects, some small projects like this one, where they needed a room to change for the sweat lodge ceremony. And so I designed this particular thing. And so there's a number of projects that I've done for them, furniture and spaces and other sorts of things that is continuing and ongoing. But for me, the idea of the design as ceremony, I like to build speculative things. There was a period of time where I was building a lot of models like these, where I was interested in the idea or notion that what if we didn't know who or what built these things, these structures? Was it an architect? Was it a human? Was it an animal? Was it something else? And those particular things were really ideas or notions that some of them came from drawing, some of them were, I call three-dimensional sketches. They're ideas about materials and spaces that began to extend themselves into larger works, and in recent years have become full-scale things. And so one of the full-scale things is this installation that I did in Sheboygan for the Bookworm Gardens as a part of a residency, and it won the Architect's Newspaper Best of Design Award for temporary installation that year. It's called Trickster. It plays on the idea or notion that in the role of the trickster in native storytelling, and that it's there. We don't really know the specific purposes of the trickster, but it's usually in the stories to tell us about our own sort of human weaknesses, vanity, greed, gluttony. Those kinds of things are the other things that the trickster is intended to tell us. And because it doesn't have particular program or function or tied to form, that's really kind of how it becomes an architectural trickster. So on the right is one of the models that I had made a few years ago, and the trickster itself is loosely based on that particular thing. It actually is using the same exact copper mesh that I used on the model I'm using on the piece. And so I'm trying to pull those ideas or notions that came from building things at scale to pulling them into full scale in installation work. In 2017, I built this installation in Columbus, Indiana. I was a Miller Prize winner, one of 5 Miller Prize winners that got to build these installations in Columbus, Indiana. This one is at the First Christian Church by Eliel Saarinen in Columbus. It's called Wiki-Ami, and it's intended to be a land acknowledgement of the people that are indigenous to that land, the Miami or Miamia. And so the name Wiki-Ami is the Miami word for wigwam, their traditional dwellings. A film that Spirit of Space made of the thing was exhibited at the 2018 Venice Architecture Biennale. I was one of 18 indigenous architects that were selected to represent Canada. I was one of 4 in the US that were part of that group, and we were part of the last Venice Biennale, and the work was exhibited there. And the exhibition is traveled across Canada. It just recently closed at the National History Museum of Canada in Ottawa, and is going to travel across other museums in Canada. And then the second theme that's in the work and my research practice and in the teaching is the idea that drawing is medicine. And so in indigenous culture, we talk about things being medicine as they make us feel better, they make the world better. And so when I'm drawing, for me, the idea of drawing is really like a ritual and not just the beginning of a design process or documenting and representing things or ideas. And this project is a research project on the Alcatraz Island, American Indian occupation of the island that happened from November of '69 to June of '71. And so in drawing, thinking about the complexities of that particular project, I developed the system of drawing things where for the most part, things that come into my mind go into the drawing. And so some of these drawings are thematic. This one is about territories. This one is about trajectories. And so how do we begin to draw or ideate as designers is really kind of what I'm interested in teaching and representation. And so some of my other drawings, these were similar to the models in that they were a series of dwellings that I started to draw and make. These particular drawings are based on the moon calendar of my tribe, the Oneida. I'm a citizen of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. I grew up on the reservation near Green Bay. And so our moon calendar has themes and different subjects that are related to the environment or rituals. So these particular pieces won K-Rob's best physical delineation for those particular years. This was a finalist on the left, and on the right was a travel sketch. So I draw when I travel too. For me, drawing is seeing, and how we begin to think about drawing is really kind of how I think about it. And that pulls itself into both analog representation and digital representation. So the ways that I was drawing started to change the way that I was rendering things. And so I teach at the undergraduate level in the Visualization 2 course. And I also teach a seminar called Visible Certainty, which is really about the theory of representation, and I deal with different subjects related to that. So I do talk about digital tools and how we begin to use them in how we represent ideas, and that the relationship between the representation of the object and the designed object is a reciprocal one, and the representation can affect those things. So I culminate these things into a studio that I teach about hip hop architecture. So I teach it in a way that I'm using all of the things that I use in my own indigenous culture. And we examine hip hop as if it is a culture. And so we do this drawing process that's similar to the Alcatraz drawings. What I'm trying to do is to get students to understand, one, the culture, the music, things that go along with the culture, and then how do we represent those ideas? How do we represent the complexities of those particular ideas? So this was a student section from one of the studios. This student also won a K-Rob prize in the student competition, won a juror's prize for that particular image. These are some models from from the last iteration of the studio, which was just in the fall. And so what I'm trying to do is how do we get the exuberance of the culture of hip hop into architecture? How do we begin to translate that, and how do we do that? The work from previous studios, the hip hop studio was in this exhibition in New York called Closer to the Edge. Is a larger group exhibition curated by Sekou Cook, who teaches at Syracuse, and he asked for work from our studio, and so students' work has been in that exhibition, which is also traveling. Got a lot of great press. Some of the students' work was in Metropolis, Hyperallergic, and Curbed. The studio itself is going to be a book that is forthcoming, so the students' work is going to be in that regard in the book as well. And so I really see architecture and culture being tied closely together, and that's kind of how I work in both in my culture and the indigenous cultures, and then I teach how to kind of translate those things in both representation and in design.
All right, great, thanks, Chris. Now I want to introduce our fellow, Jose Ibarra, who is here for 1 year. And I failed to mention the fellowship as an opportunity, as a choice opportunity in terms of studio teaching. And Jose, I'm sure you're going to share some of the work both in your research and your studio with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. So I think the first thing I want to ask everyone, if you can, is on the top right corner of your Zoom window, there should be something that says speaker view. If it doesn't say that, you're probably just looking at me, but I just want to make sure that I'm as big on your screen as possible. You'll see why in a second. So let me know when you're all ready. Okay, great. And then also the second and last thing I need to ask you is just to confirm that my background changes. Great. So good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you again to this Afternoon with Architects, and to tell you how excited I am that you might be coming to the School of Architecture and Urban Planning here at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. My name is Jose Ibarra, and I'm the 2019-2020 Urban Edge Fellow. You've already heard from faculty about the many opportunities that exist in the school for practicing, researching, and engaging with the community. But since we all would have loved to have you here today and show you around, I thought I'd take this chance to walk with you to our building and just tell you about another great part of CERUP, which is the fellowship culture. So for context, we're standing at the Commons right now, which is a shared common space in the building where events, workshops, and presentations take place. But now I'm going to get to the gist of it, which is precisely the fellowship. For several years now, the school has hired fellows like me, early career scholars and practitioners, and given us space, time, and resources to develop classes and projects that advance our field and that expose students like you to new ideas and possibilities. These fellowships are teaching and research position that let the fellows explore ideas of the discipline and practice of architecture that they're curious about. So for example, testing materials and methods of construction, translating conceptual ideas and theories into design work, pushing the limits of form, experimenting with digital technologies, and so on. And since the fellows test all these things with students, it is precisely people like you who get to participate in advancing scholarly work by doing things that you may not have heard of or thought about in a particular way. So we do research on our own, but also by teaching classes that you get to take. So this particular year, CERUP has had two fellows, Michael Jefferson and me. And while Michael has been testing the possibilities of machine learning against architecture and space making, I've been studying sites of ecological and social unrest, asking the question, how can architecture renegotiate its limits with a quickly changing environment? And to answer this prompt, the 2019-2020 academic year at CERUP has seen a myriad of classes, performances, presentations, and other work that has activated the school spaces and I hope the students' minds. So the images that you see here are part of a course that I taught last fall titled Post-Traumatic Architectures, or the Productivity of Crises. And this was an advanced theory seminar that focused on the study and application of trauma, crisis, and remediation theories into architecture. Throughout the term, a combination of reading discussions, lectures, and workshops worked together to develop the critical thinking and technical skills that were necessary for rigorous architectural speculation. Seen here in particular is a performance put together by the students as the final assignment in the course, using the Model United Nations framework in order to discuss a specific case of sand extraction practices. So in this case, rather than each student embodying a different nation, they embodied different constituencies in the sand mining problem, which went from sand itself to a mangrove tree, a turtle, a fish, a fisherman, and more. That same semester, I also taught and coordinated a studio titled Designing Objects, Relationships, and Environments, for which you're seeing an image now. And this was the first studio of the 3-year Master of Architecture graduate curriculum. This formative studio synthesized spatial, cultural, and technical approaches to design by linking common issues across multiple scales of architectural experimentation. The course followed a series of 4 interrelated projects ranging in scale and which were meant to defamiliarize, abstract, and transform existing conditions in order to render visible new objects and relationships that were already filled with spatial potentials. The studio posited different animal species as the client for architectural provocations, arguing that in exploring the relationship between human and non-human species, students could practice an extreme case of designing from a perspective outside their own, which serves them well in the future when dealing with real clients, but that also teaches them lessons in thinking and designing ecologically. So aside from these courses, last semester, Michael and I also teamed up to create a series of soft events built around our work, but in service to the students. These included a picnic with renowned architect and Harvard GSD Associate Professor Jennifer Bonner, a panel discussion at the Chicago Architecture Biennial. There was an in-house conversation around pedagogy and practice, and a lot more. So I'm showing you precisely the building now so you get a sense of how we just activated every space that we could. During the spring, the fellows teach elective studios and often hire several research assistants who help translate our work into drawings, models, and buildings. Currently, for example, I'm teaching a studio that's titled Powers of Time, a studio dealing with the relative duration of things in the universe and the effects of adding another thing. My students are working hard to generate projects that oscillate between speculation, artifice, exaggeration, and optimism, using a series of urban crises as opportunities or chances for architecture to respond to, rather than resolve, problems of the Anthropocene. And this is precisely that studio. While I cannot tell you who the 2 incoming fellows will be next semester when you're coming, I can test nuanced ways in which architecture can be made, appreciated, consumed, and sampled. I encourage you to sign up for their courses, to ask how to get involved with their work, and to trust their teaching and research process. So welcome to Sarah.
Thanks, Jose. Ooh, I'm getting dizzy in the building. So now I'd like to turn things over to Mark Keene, who's going to take us on a bike tour. Mark, let's switch back. Mark, I just unmuted you.
Okay, thanks. Let me share my screen, stop the video. Okay, we're up and running. Can you see the kids on the bikes?
We can, Mark, but it's not full screen.
Oh, sorry, right. Yep, hold on. Here we go. So if you're new to campus, you should bring your bike. If you're not and don't want to bring your bike, there is the bubbler program you see here in the light blue bikes or the dark blue bikes in the foreground where you can rent them fairly inexpensively from the city. And
Hey,
there's little
Mark.
pods of bikes on the side.
Mark, it's still not full screen.
To jump on the bike tour, we're going to head out from the courtyard every fall in September, like the second Tuesday. If you want to join us, I'll take the freshmen out, the ARC 100 class. And we'll head around the east side and show you some of the highlights of stuff that's certainly bikeable, if not walkable.
Mark, I think Mark, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The slide presentation isn't forwarding and it's still not full screen.
Any better?
We're now on the Newberry. Yeah, that looks like it's on Newberry. Yep, that's going forward.
Okay, good. Okay, so the first stop we make when we head out east and south is we go to a major urban planning gesture by Frederick Law Olmsted, where he takes the 2 most significant components of Milwaukee as sort of a landmass, which are Lake Michigan to the east and the Milwaukee River to the west. And so he connects it with this magnificent spine, which is right here, which you see sort of the dawn in the far west and people in their car probably from 1908 there. and the Unionbury Boulevard, which was built up by the magnates of industry when Milwaukee was growing at the turn of the century. If I go back a stop, you'll see at that first juncture where the students were looking, we start with the Russell Bar Williamson house. He was Wright's senior draftsperson while Wright was building the Imperial Hotel. So when he left Wright's office, he had a pretty extensive career on the east side as well. This long sort of formal axial connection between lake and river takes us to the east end of it, and on that bluff is Lake Park. So we stop for a minute, jump off our bikes, and look down the precipice of the variety of landscape that Olmsted would have designed in situ there to make it in a romantic garden. So it looks like you discovered nature where, in fact, every tree and every pathway and walkway out there was actually designed by Olmsted to create this sort of front yard for the city to come and enjoy. It's an extensive connection between the city and the lake. So right where I was standing there on the top of those rocks is a reconstructed waterfall that takes you down to the city through this forest at about a 90-foot drop to get the expanse of Lake Michigan. Back on top then, again from probably that 1908 period is a mark of when Olmsted was done to lay out the park there. And what he did when he afforded us this park to boulevard to River Park on the west end, he gave us a pattern language to develop the park system for the city of Milwaukee, which won the gold medal a handful of years ago for the best parks in the country. And so today it's referred to as the Emerald Necklace, as you can take an 8-hour bike ride and ring the city going park to park. So it's quite a great expanse of open space for the people in Milwaukee. In this old postcard, you also see the actual construct of the natural bluff here over on the right part of the screen. And since then, in the post-World War II area, Milwaukee expanded out to Lincoln Memorial Drive. And so they pushed land out here. So there's more of an esplanade or a boulevard connection at the lakefront, which connects different parts of the city today. Back on top, you see that spine by Olmsted can be formal in certain aspects to it and take us to different sort of vignettes of architecture along the park. And one of them that connects to what Sarah does in the historic preservation, they'll go out in the community and they'll work with people in need of drawings, historic American building surveys, or reconstruction ideas for rehab. And some of the ones we worked on in the studio a while ago was the North Point Tower with the Friends of Lake Park, and that since has been reconditioned and is open to the public. Once we jump out of the park and head back into the east side, we get to sort of the starting point for the Boers house we saw by Russell Bar Williamson, which is Frank Lloyd Wright's home here, the Boak House on Terrace Avenue. And this is a time and point where Wright had already completed his pre-modern architecture with the prairie style in the first decade of the 20th century. And now he's come back from his European tour, and his architecture is kind of influenced by the high qualities of centrality and symmetry of Beaux-Arts that he would have seen in Europe at the time. So his architecture sort of has this lost period from about 1910, 1911 till the 1920s, where he tries to redefine himself a second time. Once we leave that part of the east side, we head down North Avenue, which is an east-west spine south of campus, and we hit the Milwaukee River Greenway, which was established in the last 15 years to work with a defunct rail line, which you see over here on the right, and then down to the river behind the sign to the left. The path takes you to the Milwaukee River, which we see here. When I came to Milwaukee in 1990, the river at that time had 4 species of fish, and it was fairly heavily polluted from the industrialized components of the 20th century. And so a lot of people have worked very hard to create this view shed. You can see some of the buildings that were built before they established the view shed, but now the idea is any new construction, you can't really see the new construction from taking a kayak down the river. So it's a much more secure river. I believe there's 30 plus species of fish that are available in there. It's good for boating, for walking alongside of it. It's not quite swimmable yet at this point, so close to the river, but each year it gets better and better. Then hopping back on that bike trail, the old train line, there's other sites along that which we can connect to. In this case, we stopped by the Urban Ecology Center, which was a great idea in a place that was laden with crime back in the 70s and 80s. And so a group of educators got together and tried to establish the idea of children learn about nature you're going to reduce crime in a community. So the UEC is set up to establish environmental education for children within a 1 mile radius. And as we make our way down that trail, it takes us to a point still in Milwaukee County, but actually run by the village of Shorewood and Estherbrook Park. And we stop at the Benjamin Church House to kind of end the tour. And this has got sort of a historical point to start our class with freshmen to talk about classical language as being a Greek revival home from the 1850s in Milwaukee. It's a new place, and now it's celebrated as a small museum in Estherbrook Park. And for the students who make it all the way through the trip, which is about 2.5 hours, we take the class photo then to start that freshman year. As I mentioned before, you're welcome to join us. It's the second Tuesday of the fall, and we'll see what COVID has to say about that this year. If we don't do it live, I'll do a filmic version of it. When we get back in class then, we kind of review it by sketching the different sites. So from the top to the bottom, there's the Burse House down to the UEC Center. On the left is the map with UW. I'm right in the middle. You see the AUP start, and you simply sort of make a U shape, head east toward the lake, and then come down the North Avenue at the bottom of the map and take that bike trail all the way up to the north to the church house. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. So you've heard from a number of faculty. Mark, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yep.
Thanks. So you've heard from a number of faculty and what we do in terms of teach, research, make connections both in Milwaukee, in the neighborhoods, the surrounding communities, across the state, across the nation, and even across the world. So I wanted to open up to questions for students. If you have anything, we'd love to connect with you here. And obviously we can connect as well afterwards via email, but wanted to open it up. Anybody want, and also welcome you to turn your camera on if you're willing to share your space and face with us. Alexis, were you raising your hand? No, just moving it. I wonder if, you know, one of the things that has come up in my conversations with students is about the connection to practice, and we hosted an event last night for students navigating the job market, this kind of uncertain job market, and we had 5 alums join us at the event. And I'll be happy to share that out with the students on the call here today, but I think it was really helpful to hear from alums that are practicing right now and who've gone through the 2008 financial crisis and what strategies they have for navigating this kind of uncertain time as a student. So be happy to connect you with that. I know we have a couple of students that are, oh, Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was just going to be a kind of a general question for all the professors. Kind of looking forward to the fall semester, if there are disruptions at all with COVID. How has the experience been this semester with teaching studio classes? I know as someone who doesn't really have the any studio experience, wondering, I guess, how that experience has been for students. Have you gotten any feedback from them? And kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, does one of the faculty that's teaching studio, Nicole or Jose? Do you want to?
Yeah. So thanks, Michael, for your question. And I'm sure, Nicole, you'll have a different take because you've been teaching differently also. But of course, the kind of focus of the studio has varied slightly, Michael, especially because it's caught us kind of like in the midst of like an already sort of set plan. And while there was an aspiration, at least in my studio, to do a lot of many more physical models, that's kind of the main thing that hasn't happened. And yet students have really been diving into other types of media. So aside from 3D models and all the renderings and drawings and all that stuff that I would expect, we have talked a lot about other forms of architectural discourse, and in particular they've been doing film projects which have actually been super productive to discuss just architecture and space. So in a way, like I'm not, you know, it's not been ideal, but I think it's been still like a great experiment. And I say it with big optimism, because even if this thing continued for a little longer, I think if we've been able to do this much in just the spring semester, now that we have the whole summer to actually plan, as opposed to do it in 1 week, I have no doubt or hesitation that it's going to be, that it can be fantastic, or, you know, just as great, a different type of great, but still great. And there have been, as you can imagine, many ongoing conversations between us faculty about possibilities for what that may look like. And it goes from like shipping students model parts so that they can make models out of them, to meeting maybe once a week as opposed to 3 times a week. Anyway, so there's like a lot of contingencies and possible plans. Other than that, at least with my students currently, I'm meeting via Zoom, like we're meeting right now, and also using a digital platform where we are able to kind of lay out boards and as if we were looking at a wall together. So it's been great for sketching. I mean, it's in fact, I found that I would like to continue using that in the future, just because there's sort of a record of like all the sketches that have been done, and then everyone's sort of held accountable for what for kind of the direction of the projects. So yeah, I think that would be my take.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
I'll just say I'm teaching 2 classes a semester. One is an undergraduate sophomore design studio with 15 students in it, and the other is a freshman architectural making 2 class with 150 plus students in it. And I've been very, I haven't been really meeting with the students much online at all. It's been in the studio, it's been more them sending me work and me getting to spend a lot of time with them. Like this is half of the pile of like red lines that I've been printing out and like sending back to them. They kind of address the comments or questions, email back to me. And I found that that has given me an opportunity to spend more time with the work when I sit down with somebody's drawings and ideas and actually have a chance to kind of digest it and kind of like give my feedback on it in a much more kind of focused way than when you're kind of in a space with 20 students, you know, with stuff pinned up on the wall and there are all of these other distractions around. Anyway, all that to say that it's been a lot of work, I think, for students and for faculty. I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but at the same time, there's been an interesting kind of focus to the work in some ways, and that it's been good to see how that has had an impact on the kind of work now that we're at the end of the semester. I think everybody probably misses the kind of like physical community and kind of creative community that being in a building together and in a studio space together allows for, but when we do come together in platforms like this, or when we share work via various kind of social media outlets, I think it's also an interesting way to have access to the work that we don't necessarily have access to when something is in somebody's computer or in someone's drawer in studio. So I think there are pros and cons to, you know, all of this, but there's been some interesting pros that are unexpected to me.
You should consider wherever you guys go is that COVID and the crisis has given us a very important teaching moment. You know, as someone who teaches architecture and talks about architecture, architecture often tends to be extremely opticentric in the sense that, you know, we see architecture, but actually in reality, you actually experience architecture. You smell it, you touch it, you feel it, all that kind of stuff. And I think what this particular semester, and I'm not teaching a studio, so I'm not speaking for studio teaching, but what it has done is it's made people, our students, my students and I, really experience architecture in a very different way. And so in many ways, we've been talking about how all of us are marginalized. All of us are having that experience of what it is to find architecture inaccessible, architecture to be not so inclusive. All that was kind of only for, you know, women, people of color. All of a sudden, everyone is beginning to recognize what it means to be minoritized, and also what some things which were really invisible is becoming visible. So I think if you guys all begin to take this as a learning experience, a learning moment, wherever you go, I think it's I shouldn't be saying it's a great moment, but it's certainly a teaching moment. It's a, you know, reflective moment for all of us.
Chris, do you want to add anything about having taught I know 783 with the current group of 3-year grad students and maybe some of the shift that has happened?
Yeah, it's I guess the one thing I'm missing is, for me as an instructor, is just the interaction, face-to-face interaction and connection to students, because right now I'm teaching a course that's got 120 students and the cohort of 3-year grad students in it. And so I record a lecture and then they watch it and then they interact with their TAs. So that's really the kind of thing that I've missed. When I look at the work, however, I don't see any difference, to be honest. There's no lower quality work this semester. It's still high quality work. And even, you know, not teaching studio, but having been on a number of reviews, I haven't seen any diminishment in quality of the work. I do see an opportunity, as Regis said, a teaching opportunity, that students have to be clear about how they present their work. That's something that they really have to think about now, because in this format, you're in control of what people are seeing, and so you get to determine how it gets evaluated. The students that are doing that better are the ones that can really kind of hone that craft. And so that's where I kind of see the big change. I don't really think that things have changed in a negative way, but they certainly have changed in our focus and how we teach architecture, how we learn about architecture, and even how we talk about architecture.
That's great. That's a great question, Michael, that you asked. Are there, I see we have a number of our current graduate students joining the call right now. And so I want to maybe give the students maybe one last chance to ask faculty before they head out of the meeting here, if you have any other additional questions for them. And obviously, if anything comes up later on, we can connect you, connect through me, and I'm happy to connect you with other faculty. We have a question in the chat. And I'll read this from the chat. Good afternoon, professors. I'm a student from India. I've completed my bachelor's in architecture here. I was wondering if maybe there was an alum or a current student who had similar experience, just to find out what all to prep for so I don't fall behind. I've been admitted to the 2-year. And maybe I'll take that. Bagisha, I'll connect you. We have a number of Indian students, both current in the program, and actually Yash may be joining us in a minute here, and alums from the program from India that have had great success, and I'll be happy to connect you with that. So with that said, I'm going to allow the faculty to excuse themselves, and thank you for presenting today. It was great to see. And if the students stay on, and I can reintroduce the students here. So thank you all. So as people pop off. So I want to introduce, sorry, squares are moving around. So I'm going to introduce the students, and when I do, the graduate students that are our current graduate students want to unmute for a second and say hi. So Lisa Sun is here, and she is Lisa, do you want to wave?
Hi.
And Lisa is part of the 3-year cohort of students. She's in her first year of the program. Callista Gorel is here.
Hi, guys.
Callista is in her 2nd year of a 2-year MArch. Is that right? And then Eric is here. Eric, I'm blanking on your last name for a second.
Nottinger, yeah, it's hiding.
Eric is in the 1st year of the 3-year program with Lisa. You all are part of the cohort of 3 years. And then David Katz is here in the hat.
Hello.
And David is in his 1st year of the 2-year MArch program. And I think, let me look around here really quickly. I think we should have 1 or 2 others joining, but I think this is a good start to this. So this is, and I'm actually going to leave the call unless you want me to stay, but I generally thought it's much easier for students to communicate with other students if their faculty not around. So I was going to leave, and if somebody, Callista maybe, or any of you, if you want me back on the call, you can just send me an email for some reason, but I'm going to pop off. So, oh, Callista, you hid yourself. So is that okay? Thumbs up, maybe, and then you can all unmute yourselves and talk freely. And Mary and Kurt, I know that you're on the call, but you might want to pop out too. or I'll kick you out. Let me kick these people out. All right. They were there for support, so not to worry. So let me know if you need anything, and otherwise enjoy the conversation, and thanks. And again, if you have questions following up on this, we're excited to see you in the fall for those that are already enrolled, and we will do the best we can with whatever we're given in the fall. So, all right, so I'm going to sign off here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Mel.
See ya.
How's everyone doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. I think I've met some of you all before at open houses, so that's fun. I guess, what all questions might you have for myself, David, Lisa, Eric? I think Yash is also joining.
Right, he's supposed to.
Yeah, we're here for you guys.
Are any of you 3-year students, or are you all 2-year students?
I am a 3-year student.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So I guess advice for 3-year students, since it's a little bit unique, but I guess this could apply to everybody. Any advice for a way to prepare it all for the first semester of the program, or do you kind of just jump in? I don't know if that, like, any at home learning. I kind of have a lot of time on my hands right now because of COVID. So if you have any advice for something, project to work on or something, some skills to build, anything like that.
Lisa?
I was gonna see if you want to answer that question, but I can start. I think it'd be really helpful if you could learn some Rhino. It's one of the software that we use heavily in both visualization and studio. Though you might not get to until later in studio, it's heavily used in your first visualization course. And that course took so long for me to pick up as a 3-year student since I didn't have any previous experience in it. So most of the time was kind of wasted on like troubleshooting, trying to figure out how to do things. So I think if you can get at least a good solid foundation in that, you'll be saving a lot of time in those classes. I'll let anyone else add to that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You can download that software. It's pretty expensive, but you can download it as a student and get a trial for a few months. And it's just good to know you can continue to just make up new emails and re-download it, so you don't really ever have to purchase it until you're ready, because it is pricey. But Lisa makes a great point that learning takes a lot of your time the first semester to use Rhino. So you don't have to be a master of it by any means going into it, but just taking a few of those tutorials and understanding some of the basic tools that it gives you will just give you like that much more time when you're stressed about other classes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure when you guys get uwm.edu emails after you enroll, but once you have that, you should be able to access Lynda Videos, which is now owned by LinkedIn. So you'll be able to access free videos, which include a lot of resources on Rhino and other software. So that's really helpful. And then with that .edu email address, you can also get a ton of free student trials or student subscriptions to software.
What was that called?
Lynda.com. I don't know the current address, but if you type in lynda.com, they'll redirect you to where you need to be. I'm also sending it to the chat in case you guys need that.
What's your background, Michael?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's in geography.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've worked a lot with like software, but just like GIS software and a lot of map building and that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Additionally, just sketch a lot, just draw, just get used to being in your sketchbook.
Okay, Abby in the comments also She says, hello, my microphone isn't working, but I wanted to chat about the MARC 3 program. So again, Lisa and Eric, I guess, Abby, do you have any specific questions that you want to type? And we can give you a hot second on that because I know it takes just a minute. In the meantime, who are the 2-year MARC students?
I'm one, which I actually did my undergrad at UWM, so
Okay.
I did the open house. I was kind of forced to by someone, so that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm also a 2-year student.
Okay, awesome. And do you guys have any questions? David and I are 2-year students.
Mm-hmm. I did my undergraduate at UWM as well. And you were at for undergrad?
Oh, I was at the University of Kansas.
Okay.
So I'm from Kansas City, and I moved to Milwaukee to do graduate school here. And I have a teaching assistantship, which heavily influenced why I came to Milwaukee. And it's been, yeah, great experience being a teaching assistant, being new to the city. I didn't know a single person, but yeah, I guess, Alexis, you'll probably know people and be kind of familiar with the area, but even if you aren't, as like an outsider myself, I didn't find it super hard to like become immersed in the like syrup life and kind of scene, as well as just like Milwaukee. There's so many things going on, and it's a really great place if you're not familiar with the area, because you can just kind of get out. Yeah.
So I can answer Abby's question in the chat. I mean, from my experience, and I've been at syrup for 5 years now, there's really no difference between 2 years and 3-year grads at the end of it. I think part of the 3-year program is just kind of catching you up with some of the stuff that we learned, the 2 years learned in an undergrad program. So certain like systems courses or representation courses that like I took as an undergrad, you would also be taking. So it's kind of like a condensed version of that. And in the end, there's really no different for the job market. I actually think, in my opinion, a lot of the 3-year grads' final thesis projects are almost more exciting than the 2-year grad, because the 3-year students come from such like diverse backgrounds and talents and interests that it really creates like anytime like you have like a group of 3-year students, because they seem to always stick together. It's always really interesting to see. So I don't think there's any difference at the end of it. It's just probably a little different that first year, and then after the first year, I believe you're taking the same elective courses and comprehensive courses as the 2-year grads. It's just that first year that's slightly different. And I'm not sure if you guys can back up with Lisa and Eric as far as like currently what the program is, because I only know the 2-year curriculum, but yeah, that's my experience. It's pretty much the same.
Yeah, so about the part with having an unrelated bachelor's degree, my bachelor's was in English, so I was completely away from anything remotely architecture. I was slightly creative with certain creative writing courses, but that's about it. I feel like I'm doing fine. The professors do a really good job of laying the groundwork for you and building or giving you projects that build skills that really ramp up to get us competitive with the 2 years by next year. So right now, I think I feel pretty confident in the skills that I've developed this year to go ahead and join the 2 years next year. I do think that it was sad to have to transition to online, but it hasn't diminished the skill building that will enhance our abilities next year.
Yeah, my background is a little bit more relevant than Eric's, but still not architecture. My bachelor's was a double major in art and computer science. And I would like to add that the first year, they really do give you a very deep and comprehensive overview of what the undergraduate program would have been like. So you just get tossed into a ton of information. You get to try a lot of different programs and projects, and it's very challenging. And I've had professors tell me that usually 3-year students, they end up pushing themselves harder like once they are taking the same courses as the 2-year students, just because they're kind of used to challenging themselves and then keeping that momentum going. So that's another thing.
It's a lot of learning things the hard way the first year, but it's okay. We all do it.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to also ask us questions once you start, because it's a lot to take in the first year, so it can definitely be overwhelming.
Are any of you finishing up a bachelor's currently, or are you kind of in a period of transition?
I graduated in December, so
okay.
I've just been working, and yeah, just waiting to start school again, I guess.
Yeah, I did the same, so I'm ready to go back to school.
Yeah, I also took a year break between my undergraduate and graduate, just to get myself recollected, and knew that I was going back into it with like the right mindset of what I wanted to study. So yeah.
I graduated 10 years ago, so that's plenty of time.
So you're really ready.
Yeah, I'm really ready to go back to school.
Awesome.
Yeah, I completed my, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I completed my bachelor's in June. So I guess, yeah, it'll be more than a year when I start.
That's good. Little refresher period's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a very different background. I completed my bachelor's what is it now, 6 years ago, and I graduated from medical school back in May. And so I'm changing careers now, actually, and I'm interested in architecture. So I come from a very different background as well, but I'm interested in how I can use elements from my past and incorporate them into an architecture study. And so, Callista, when you mentioned that you're going back, or you went back to school after taking a year off, what was that adjustment like? Well, you're in the 2-year program, so yeah, kind of different, because I would be going into the 3-year program.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just really spent my year between undergrad and graduate. So I did my undergraduate in architecture as well. I got a BS in arch. And so really for me, I had an interest in historic preservation, and I knew that I really wanted to go to a school that would let me emphasize that and make that part of my future career. And so I just spent a lot of time working out, spiffying up old projects, brushing up on my skills, making sure I was going to a place where I knew I would be able to study preservation, which Milwaukee is great for. And then, I mean, the transition was fairly smooth. So I moved here in August and school starts in September. So I kind of had a month in an apartment before school had even started to kind of explore Milwaukee, which will look different for you all in the current situation. You might not get to do as much exploring, but yeah, I think all of the professors are were really helpful in bringing me in as someone that was new to the university in general, just because there's, it's super different, and coming from a similar background of architecture, for you it'll be even more stark of a contrast coming from a medical background. But and I don't know if anyone else like attests to this, but being in the 2-year and having like a handful of cohorts in the 3-year, I always extremely, extremely appreciate the backgrounds that the 3 years bring, because I can't think from like an English major background or like a medical background, and they play such an important part in architecture and how you're going to wind up designing. And so like it's really beneficial for you guys to be able to like jump in with us, the 2 years that have a little bit more experience in the architectural realm starting out, but you guys also influence us a lot. And so I don't know if that is a good answer to your question, but yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you had that support. That is really helpful. I'm also wondering, you mentioned you had that assistantship too. What is it like balancing what would be almost work through that, school and life?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. David is also a teaching assistant. We taught or assistant taught the same class in the fall together, and that was fun. It's not extremely difficult if you're able to manage your time in an effective manner. I think that's what everything is about, really. In addition to being a teaching assistant, I also have an internship at a firm in town, and I'm only there 8 hours a week, but I think being a teaching assistant and having that work kind of intertwined with school makes it a little bit, it's easier and harder than a normal job at the same time. So you're always around the people that you're working with in school and working with for your like job. But it does make it like a really smooth like work school kind of relationship sometimes. So I know I got the chance to teach, I don't know what other word to use, but I'm not a teacher, teach a class twice for the past 2 falls. And then the spring semester classes that I've been able to teach are different. So it's been really great being someone that came from outside of Syrup, getting a taste for the undergraduate course load to begin with, and then also to like interact with those students that I wouldn't get to otherwise. It's been a really big part of like my time here and it's drawing to a close because I do graduate in a couple weeks, which is crazy, but yeah, I think 3-year students are able to apply for teaching assistantships starting their 2nd year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I would add that usually studio professors for your 1st year in the 3-year program, they heavily recommend not having a side job, especially a full-time job, because you devote so much time to studio. For example, my 2nd semester studio, the estimate for how much hours we put in per week is around 40 hours on average just for the studio class, and that could be more during project deadlines. That being said, I do work part-time at the university as a student web developer just because I can since my background. And since it's a job through the university, they're very flexible with me. So when it comes time to finals, when it comes time to final studio projects, they're very flexible with me taking time off. So I probably work maybe average of 10 hours a week. And I've been able to pull that off, but I've always felt that I could step back from it if I needed to. So there's some flexibility. It's doable, but don't have a job you need to commit to, at least for your first year.
And
for 3-year students.
I want to add on to what Calista said about the teaching assistantship. It's nice because I think it works with your schedule, just because, say, homework, I mean, besides having to attend the class that you're a TA for, some of the stuff is kind of, you're able to do on your own schedule, like grading, uploading documents, stuff that, like, the responsibilities that your faculty gives you. So I think that's fairly flexible to do. I would recommend it to students because I think it gives you a chance, like in the case of, I think both Calista and I, is now we're doing thesis with our the Professor Moon who we TA for. So it's a good opportunity to make a connection with the faculty and kind of create a relationship beyond just like having one class with them, but it's a good way to kind of make be more involved as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point, because most of the connections that I've made with professors have been through ones that I've been an assistant for, and have like really helped me like in my second year. So.
And you mentioned you have an internship right now, but they mentioned earlier in the segment when the professors were here about externships, I think they're called, like 2-week stints for winter or spring break.
Yeah.
I was wondering if anybody's done that or what that experience is like. I
haven't. Have you other students?
Yeah, I have done it now 4 years. I did my sophomore year. So the past 3 years, I was in Milwaukee, local Milwaukee firms. And this past winter break, I was at a firm in Chicago. The first 2 years, I just kind of put my name out there, or signed up for the externship, and then I was placed because it's like Carl or Mo, depending on who's working on it, kind of organizes everything, and they connect you with local firms. So you basically just put your name in, and then they kind of connect you with someone. You can do 2-week or 1-week externships, so they're unpaid externships, either over winter break or over spring break. The third time I did it, I actually had someone in Milwaukee that I wanted to extern with, so I kind of set it up myself and used the externship program as kind of a way of doing it. Because all the firms in Milwaukee usually participate, and there's a really good relationship between them and the school. And then this past winter, I just again put my name in, but I had a few more like specific things that I wanted to do. So I kind of, because you're able to type what or like kind of fill out what you'd like to do. And they matched me with a smaller firm in Chicago that is very design focused, which was a great opportunity because it was spending a week in Chicago that I wouldn't typically be able to do because, it was an unpaid internship basically for a week that helps them and it helps me. So it was a good opportunity, and it's always, there's always a lot of students that take part in it, and it's always pretty successful. I'm not sure.
I just to like a point that David made, like getting to sample the different types of firms. I was able to do that through internships, but that's because I took a year off. So in my year off, I worked at a boutique firm in Kansas City. I was doing a bit more like design work. There was like 8 people in the office. And then where I am now, it's an office of like 60 people, and I'm doing research. So I think while you're in school, the externships are a really great way to like sample different firm types.
Different sizes, all those, different types of projects.
Yeah, just because you really don't know what you're going to like the most until you try them out. So those like 2-week periods are super, super good for that. Yeah.
Any other questions? I have to log off because I have studio now, so Yeah, keep asking people questions. Hopefully you see some of you I see some of you in the fall, and good luck trying to figure all this stuff out. I know it's a lot to do, a really weird time to be doing it, so good luck. Bye.
Yeah.